So in all honesty, when I opened up that email the other day, my heart nearly stopped. What's going on, guys? My name is Tomic and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. On this channel, we talk about architecture and technology. If that's something that interests you, make sure you smash that subscribe button down below, because today we're talking all things architecture. For those of you who are actually long-time subscribers, a quick life update. I am 100% out of my moon boot. My Achilles tendon is fully repaired, semi. I'm back on my feet, walking slowly with a little bit of a limp, but I'm actually back on my feet, which is fantastic. I've recently sat my final exam to become a fully registered architect in Western Australia. And if you haven't guessed it already, I have been successful in that attempt. So today we're talking about how and what you need to do to become a registered architect in Australia. So let's start way back at the beginning. In Australia, you need to have 2 degrees. You need to have an undergraduate degree, which is a 3-year full-time course at most universities around Australia. And then you need to acquire a master's degree, which is another 2 years full-time at most universities in Australia. So a total of 5 years at university and a very large HECS bill. In all honesty, this is probably the easiest part of the whole process. It's the time where you actually get to enjoy life, get to learn about what you're passionate about, and you just really get to learn about architecture. So these first 5 years, as hard as they might seem, are definitely some of the best. So enjoy them and cherish them. I don't want to really spend too much time on this bit because once you're in university, you're taught about this. What you're not taught about is how and what the process is of going from university, graduating as a Masters of Architecture graduate, and going all the way to a fully registered architect. There's a lot of steps in between, there's a lot of things you need to learn. So today, let's go through that bit one by one. First of all, I sat all my exams here in the state of Western Australia. With most architecture courses and the title architect, it's protected in different manners across the entire world, and there is different regulations in each state. So some things to what I say here may differ in your state, and they'll more than likely differ in your country. So take what I say here with a grain of salt and make sure you do your own research first. Anyway, step 1 to becoming a registered architect after you've passed your master's degree is your logbook and statement of practical experience. Your logbook is issued by the Architects Board here in Western Australia, and it's a very long form that you basically fill out every single day after work. At least that's the best way I found to fill it out. If you leave it for too long, it ends up taking way too much of your time to fill out. But basically what the logbook is, it's a couple pages about you, and then it's a couple pages, about 80 pages, of logging your experience. Very similar to how you had to log your driver's exam and every hour that you did. So there's 15 performance criteria in the logbook that you have to attend to. If you're studying under an architect, then it makes it very simple. There's 3 categories you can fill in, and you can pretty much do the 3,300 hours that are minimum required, which is approximately 2 years full-time at 40 hours a week, pretty easily. So the 3 categories are executive level, participant, and observer. They're all pretty self-explanatory as well. So the executive level, you've done everything yourself. The participant level, you've participated in the event. And the observer level, well, obviously you've just observed what's going on. I personally didn't study under an architect. I went into a building design firm with no technical registered architect there to supervise me, which was, I guess, a good thing and a bad thing in my experience. Good thing being that I was given the opportunity to do every single bit of the practice and learn in my own way, making sure that I had to do all the research, find out what was the correct way of doing it, and then putting it into practice. The bad thing is I had to do all that research, I had to learn it all on my own, and there wasn't somebody truly guiding me step by step. I did have a director that was very caring and considerate throughout that whole process and made the process significantly easier than most of my peers who have tried to study under architects. So I guess in the long run, and for me personally, it definitely worked out in my favor. But more to the point, if you aren't studying under an architect, it means you can only log your hours under the executive level. It means you have to be the decision maker. You have to do all the work. That doesn't usually happen at the start, so it takes a little bit of time for you to get into practice, learn what you need to do, and then be able to start logging hours under executive level. What I've already mentioned is there's 3,300 hours in the logbook as a minimum to complete part 1. What I didn't mention is that there's 3 parts in the state of Western Australia and in Australia in a whole, I'm pretty sure, to complete your registration as an architect. Part 1 is very simple. It is the logbook and your statement of practical experience, which I'll get into in a second. Part 2 is an online exam that is usually done in a testing facility, and part 3 is examination by interview. Now, full disclosure, I passed part 1 and part 2 on my first go. Part 3, I sat last year and wasn't successful, unfortunately. In all honesty, I was pretty well aware of the fact that I wasn't going to pass that exam. When I came out of it, I was extremely nervous, I wasn't confident, and I didn't know half the answers. So when I received that email saying, unfortunately you didn't pass, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, I knew it was coming. This year, it was definitely a different story. We'll keep going with that though. So the first time I finished my logbook and went to sit part 2, I had 3,600 hours logged in my logbook. The second time I had 6,300 hours logged. I worked my butt off the next year to be able to actually gain all the knowledge and learn every single thing that I needed to know about this exam. It was the best year of my life because I learned so much, I absorbed so much knowledge, and I became a much better practitioner. So in order to go from part 1 to sit part 2, you have to submit your logbook to the board. Alongside the logbook, you have to submit a statement of practical experience. It's simply a Word document of about 2,000 words if you're studying under an architect, or 3,000 if you're not. It is a very simple exercise. It is go through your logbook, look at the jobs that you've done that are pretty major. Go through them, list them one by one, pick maybe 4 or 5 of value and importance, and then write a little bit of a brief and a blurb about them, which relates back to those 15 criteria that I mentioned previously in the logbook. Upon completing the statement of practical completion, you submit that, your logbook, certified copies of all your documents, and everything else that the forms require for sitting part 2. And of course, this doesn't come free, it comes at a price like everything in life. Part 2 of the APE, or the Architectural Practical Exam, is, like I mentioned, an online exam at a testing facility. Now, I'm not allowed to disclose too much about part 2 or part 3, but what I can tell you is very important. Part 2 is 5 scenarios with 6 questions on each scenario, and it is 60 minutes in total. It is usually sat in an enclosed testing facility supervised by highly experienced people. That way, they ensure that you can't cheat and you're only looking at your own work. This year, I think it was a little bit different. They may have sat it online because of COVID. I didn't sit my part 2 this year, I sat it last year. So I'm not actually aware of how they did it this year. There is that potential of doing it online at your own home, but I'm guessing moving forward, once we continue to progress out of COVID, we will definitely be going back to those isolated, lockdown testing facilities. Part 2 is predominantly on your knowledge of running a practice and running a project. It is literally that simple. If you can understand the fundamentals of starting a business as an architect at an architectural firm, and understand the process of managing a job from design development all the way to practical completion and project handover, is very important. The main things they do really hammer on is project management, because from the industry's point of view, at least to my understanding, that is the point where most architects get sued, and that is the point where most of us get a bad name. So if you know your stuff in project management, you're less likely to end up in that category of bad eggs, which is exactly what the Institute is looking for. Good graduates with lots of experience. So make sure you're highly experienced in project management and don't spend all your time just sketching and drawing. Yes, being a good architect is sketching and drawing, but there's a lot more to it. That's actually one of the reasons why I failed my original Part 3 exam, because I didn't have all of those project management experience and knowledge. Originally, I went into it, I believe, with about 100 hours of each category required for project management. 100 hours in the grand scheme of things to understand project management is nothing. There are so many contracts out there that you have to understand, read through, legalities and bits and pieces that you have absolutely no idea what they mean until they come up in real life and you have to figure it out. So make sure that whatever firm you go to starting out, or whatever firm you're in now, if you're going to sit your practical exam, get as much practical knowledge and project management experience as absolutely possible. If this isn't an option, like it wasn't really an option for me at the start, I invested in the PALS program, which is run by the Institute of Architects. It is a pretty expensive course in my personal opinion. It's about $1,200 from memory once you buy all the bits and pieces that you have to get into it. But it is very, very, very valuable. From memory, it's about 900 pages worth of information and about 80 hours of video content. They have recently, as of this year, actually just updated the PALS program and the course. So there is so much up-to-date information that is definitely worth knowing and reading. Even if you're a completely educated architect, practicing day in, day out, I do personally recommend going back and learning this information if you have the spare time, because it is simply valuable to refresh your knowledge. There's things I knew but completely forgot. So again, it is a very valuable resource if you have the financial means to afford this course. I'll leave a link for it down in the description below. Again, I have no affiliation to this course. It's not like something I can sell. It is run by the Institute themselves. There's no promotions, there's no schemes. It's literally just a really, really useful course for you guys to do if you need that added help. Now, APE Part 3 is the final examination by interview. It's simply conducted as an interview. It's yourself and two highly experienced practitioners in front of you. It is about a 45-minute to 1 hour interview where they literally just drill you with questions non-stop. It isn't about really picking at your flaws, but it is actually about picking at your flaws. What the interviewers are looking for on the other side is, what don't you know? Where do you fall short? And is that a problem for the Institute and the Architect Protected title? If you know your stuff, don't stress. You'll go through it like a breeze. When I went through it the second time, I came out extremely confident. I was like, I knew every question, I was very confident, but at the same time, because I had that disappointment last year, I kept thinking to myself, don't get too hyped up, don't get too worked up, and if you don't pass, it's still okay, you have another chance. Even though I knew deep down that I did really well. So what I'm trying to get across is know your stuff, learn as much as you possibly can. And if you're going into that interview prepared, you should have no issues. If you're going underprepared and haven't actually done council work, development applications, worked with high-end multi-residential, low-end multi-residential, commercial, bits and pieces, learn on the bits that you aren't sure about, because they're probably gonna ask some questions about it. But overall, the interview is very similar to the APE Part 2. It's testing your knowledge on starting a firm, and it's testing your knowledge on the whole project experience, as if I were a new client coming to you from day one to handover. So make sure you go through and learn every detail between A and Z, because there's a good chance they'll ask any question in between the spectrum. It isn't really something that you can study for in just book smarts. You definitely need the experience as well. What happens once you're registered? Once you get that glorious email that I received the other day? Well, from there on in, it's pretty simple. You fill out some forms, you submit to the board for application, they review your application, hopefully they approve it, you become a registered architect, and then every year you have to complete a minimum of 20 continuous professional development points. The simplest way to explain that is 1 hour of professional development equals 1 point. So if you go to a seminar that's 2 hours long, then you get 2 points for it, they give you a certificate, you keep that information, and you have to provide it the next year when you go to re-register for the following year. Otherwise, in a nutshell, that is basically the process from day one to the day you're registered. It is an extremely long process. It took me almost 8 years to complete. So from day one of architecture, 5 years at university, and then another 3 years of actual practical experience, which, no lie, they're very different worlds. University and real life are very, very different. You come out of university thinking you know everything. You come out of the registration process thinking, oh, I know nothing. So it is a very valuable lesson to learn. But the 8 years are extremely valuable and such an amazing process. Anyway, that's all for me today, guys. I'm completely out of breath, so I'm gonna call it a day. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you smash that like button down below to help this video with the YouTube algorithm. And if you wanna see more of my content, smash that subscribe button down below, hit the little bell if you wanna be notified, and as always, I'll see you next Monday.